The morning sun cast long shadows across the dusty military compound as Sergeant Maria Santos checked her equipment one final time. At 26, she had already served 3 tours overseas, but something felt different about this mission. The intelligence report spoke of heavy enemy presence in the valley ahead, and the tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife. Commander James Mitchell gathered his squad around the tactical map spread across a makeshift table. His weathered face showed the strain of countless operations, but his voice remained steady as he outlined their objective. They were to secure a strategic checkpoint that had fallen to insurgent forces the night before. The mission seemed straightforward on paper, but Maria's instincts told her otherwise. As the convoy rolled out through the gates, Maria found herself in the second vehicle, her rifle ready and her eyes scanning the horizon. The landscape was deceptively peaceful, with rolling hills dotted with olive trees and small villages in the distance. Children waved from doorways while their mothers watched cautiously from behind curtained windows. The radio crackled with routine check-ins as they made their way through the winding mountain roads. Commander Mitchell's voice came through clearly, discussing route changes and timing with the lead vehicle. Maria noticed how he always took the most dangerous position at the front, never asking his soldiers to face risks he wouldn't take himself. Halfway to their destination, the convoy stopped for a scheduled break. Maria stepped out to stretch her legs and noticed storm clouds gathering in the distance. The locals they passed seemed unusually quiet, avoiding eye contact and quickly disappearing into their homes. An elderly man selling fruit by the roadside packed up his cart and hurried away when he saw their vehicles approaching. These subtle signs troubled Maria, though she couldn't put her finger on exactly why. She had learned to trust her instincts during her years of service, and right now they were telling her that danger lurked somewhere ahead. As they prepared to move out again, she double-checked her ammunition and made sure her communication equipment was functioning properly. The convoy resumed its journey toward the checkpoint, unaware that enemy fighters had been tracking their movement since dawn. Hidden observers with binoculars watched from concealed positions in the hills, relaying information about the Americans' numbers and equipment to their commanders. The trap was being carefully prepared, waiting for the perfect moment to spring. As they crested a hill overlooking the target area, Commander Mitchell called for another halt to survey the terrain below. Through his binoculars, he could see the checkpoint building, apparently abandoned but potentially harboring hidden threats. The surrounding area offered limited cover, with open ground on most approaches to the structure. Maria joined several other squad members in studying the approaches to their objective. Something about the scene below felt wrong to her experienced eye. The checkpoint appeared too quiet, too empty, as if it had been deliberately abandoned to lure them in. She mentioned her concerns to Commander Mitchell, who nodded thoughtfully and adjusted their approach plan. Unknown to them, insurgent fighters were already in position around the checkpoint, having anticipated the American response. They had spent hours preparing their ambush, positioning weapons and explosives to maximum effect. The stage was set for a confrontation that would test every soldier's courage and training. The final approach to the checkpoint began as the afternoon shadows grew longer. Maria's heart rate increased as they moved down the hillside, every sense alert for signs of danger. The quiet was unnerving, broken only by the sound of their boots on the rocky ground and the distant call of a hawk circling overhead. As they reached the perimeter of the checkpoint area, Commander Mitchell signaled for the squad to spread out and advance cautiously. Maria took position on the left flank, her training kicking in automatically as she moved from cover to cover. The building ahead loomed larger with each step, its windows dark and empty like hollow eyes watching their approach. The first shot rang out like thunder, shattering the tense silence and sending the squad diving for cover behind rocks and low walls. Maria flattened herself against a concrete barrier as bullets began flying from multiple directions, the distinctive crack of rifle fire echoing off the surrounding hills. The ambush had been perfectly timed and executed. Commander Mitchell's voice cut through the chaos on the radio, calling for positions and coordinating the squad's response. Maria could see him about 50 meters ahead, taking shelter behind an overturned vehicle while directing their defensive efforts. Muzzle flashes erupted from windows and rooftops around the checkpoint, revealing the true scope of the trap they had walked into. The intensity of the enemy fire was unlike anything Maria had experienced before. Bullets struck the ground around her position, sending up clouds of dust and fragments of stone. She counted at least 6 different firing positions, suggesting a well-coordinated enemy force that had been planning this ambush for some time. Private Johnson, positioned to Maria's right, cried out as a bullet grazed his shoulder. She watched him press himself lower against his cover, trying to stop the bleeding while maintaining his grip on his weapon. The sight of her wounded comrade's blood sparked a cold fury in Maria's chest, sharpening her focus and determination. Commander Mitchell attempted to move his position to get a better angle on the enemy fighters, but a burst of automatic weapons fire forced him to retreat to his previous cover. Maria realized that their squad was pinned down in an exposed position, with limited options for advancement or retreat. The enemy had chosen their battlefield well. Through the smoke and confusion, Maria began identifying individual enemy positions by tracking their muzzle flashes and the direction of incoming fire. Years of combat experience had taught her to read the battlefield like a tactical map, noting weak points and opportunities even in the most chaotic situations. The radio chatter intensified as squad members reported their positions and ammunition status. Maria could hear the strain in their voices as they realized the severity of their situation. Call signs crackled back and forth as soldiers coordinated their limited options for escape or counterattack. A rocket-propelled grenade streaked overhead, exploding against the hillside behind them and showering the squad with debris. The message was clear. The enemy possessed heavy weapons and the tactical advantage. Maria knew they needed to act quickly before their situation became completely hopeless. "Commander," Mitchell made the difficult decision to attempt a fighting withdrawal to more defensible positions higher up the hillside. He began directing squad members to move back in stages, providing covering fire for each other as they retreated from their exposed positions. Maria watched as several soldiers successfully made the dangerous sprint to better cover, but she noticed that Commander Mitchell remained in his forward position, continuing to direct the withdrawal and provide covering fire for his men. His selfless leadership was keeping the squad together, but it was also putting him in tremendous danger. Enemy fighters began advancing from their concealed positions, sensing an opportunity to overrun the American position. Maria counted at least 12 insurgents moving through the checkpoint area, their weapons trained on the retreating soldiers. The situation was rapidly deteriorating. A sustained burst of machine gun fire erupted from a rooftop position, forcing Commander Mitchell to hunker down behind his cover. Maria watched in horror as the concrete barrier protecting him began to crumble under the relentless impacts. She realized he was trapped in an untenable position. The sound of approaching vehicles added a new element of danger to the situation. Through the dust and smoke, Maria could see enemy reinforcements arriving in pickup trucks mounted with heavy weapons. What had been a difficult situation was rapidly becoming desperate. Commander Mitchell's voice came through the radio one more time, calm and professional despite his circumstances. He reported his position and the advancing enemy forces, then gave orders for the squad to continue their withdrawal without him. His meaning was clear. He was prepared to sacrifice himself to save his soldiers. Something fundamental shifted inside Maria when she heard Commander Mitchell's transmission. The thought of leaving him behind went against everything she believed in as a soldier and as a human being. While her squad mates continued their withdrawal up the hillside, she made a decision that would define the rest of her life. Instead of following the retreat order, Maria began moving laterally along the hillside, using whatever cover she could find to work her way toward Commander Mitchell's position. Her movement was slow and dangerous, requiring her to cross open ground while enemy fighters maintained their relentless fire. The weight of her equipment seemed insignificant compared to the weight of her decision. Each step forward was a conscious choice to risk everything for her commander. Her training had prepared her for combat, but nothing could have prepared her for the raw terror and determination she felt in this moment. Bullets whined past her head as she sprinted between cover points, her heart hammering against her ribs. The enemy had spotted her movement and was trying to cut her off before she could reach Commander Mitchell. She could hear their shouts in the distance, coordinating their efforts to stop her advance. Maria reached a position about 30 meters from Commander Mitchell's location and assessed the situation. The enemy fighters were closing in from multiple directions, and his concrete barrier was nearly destroyed by the sustained fire. She estimated she had perhaps 2 minutes before they would overrun his position. Her ammunition was running low, and she knew that any rescue attempt would likely be a one-way mission. The thought crossed her mind briefly, but she dismissed it just as quickly. Commander Mitchell had risked his life for every member of their squad countless times. Now it was her turn to return that loyalty. A fragment of concrete struck her helmet as she prepared to move again, reminding her of how exposed and vulnerable she was. The enemy fire seemed to be intensifying, as if they sensed that something decisive was about to happen. Their shouts grew louder and more urgent. Maria checked her remaining ammunition one final time and said a quick prayer. Then she took a deep breath and sprinted toward Commander Mitchell's position, her rifle firing continuously to suppress the enemy fighters who were trying to intercept her. The world narrowed to a tunnel of focus and determination. The distance to Commander Mitchell seemed to stretch endlessly as she ran, each step feeling like it took forever while bullets cracked past her ears. She could see him now, crouched behind what remained of his cover, his uniform torn and bloodied but his weapon still ready. Time seemed to slow as she covered the final meters to his position. She dove the last few feet, sliding into cover beside him just as a burst of automatic weapons fire shredded the air where she had been standing. Commander Mitchell stared at her in amazement, clearly not believing what he was seeing. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Commander Mitchell grabbed her shoulder and shouted over the gunfire, demanding to know why she had disobeyed his order to withdraw. Maria looked him straight in the eye and told him that no soldier gets left behind, not on her watch. The brief reunion was interrupted by the sound of enemy fighters moving closer to their position. Through gaps in their deteriorating cover, they could see insurgents advancing with weapons ready. It was clear that their defensive position would be overrun within minutes. Commander Mitchell pointed to a small depression in the ground about 20 meters away that might offer better protection. Getting there would require crossing open ground under direct enemy fire, but staying in their current position meant certain capture or death. Maria nodded her understanding and prepared to provide covering fire, while Commander Mitchell made the dangerous sprint to the new position. She could see the determination in his eyes, mixed with gratitude for her decision to stay with him. Together they began preparing for what might be their final tactical movement. Maria opened fire with controlled bursts, forcing the advancing enemy fighters to seek cover while Commander Mitchell prepared to move. Her accuracy was remarkable under such intense pressure, with several insurgents diving for protection as her bullets struck dangerously close to their positions. Commander Mitchell waited for the perfect moment when Maria's suppressive fire was most effective, then launched himself from their crumbling shelter toward the depression they had identified. Maria continued firing, tracking targets and adjusting her aim to keep the enemy pinned down during his vulnerable sprint. Halfway to the new position, Commander Mitchell stumbled and fell, crying out in pain as he hit the ground hard. Maria could see blood spreading across his leg where a bullet had found its mark. He was wounded and exposed in the middle of open ground with enemy fighters closing in from multiple directions. Without hesitation, Maria abandoned her covered position and ran toward her fallen commander. Enemy fire erupted around her as she crossed the open ground, bullets striking the dirt at her feet and whining past her head. Her only thought was reaching Commander Mitchell before the insurgents could capture or kill him. She reached him just as several enemy fighters emerged from cover, preparing to advance on his position. Maria spun around and opened fire, her training taking over as she engaged multiple targets in rapid succession. Her marksmanship was exceptional, forcing the insurgents to retreat to cover. Commander Mitchell was conscious but in serious pain from his leg wound. Blood was flowing steadily, and Maria knew he needed immediate medical attention. However, their current position offered no protection, and enemy fighters were maneuvering to surround them completely. Maria grabbed Commander Mitchell under the arms and began dragging him toward the nearest cover, a low stone wall about 15 meters away. Her progress was painfully slow as she tried to move his weight while maintaining awareness of the tactical situation around them. Bullets struck the ground around them as enemy fighters opened fire on their exposed position. Maria felt the impact as one round grazed her arm, but she ignored the burning pain and continued pulling Commander Mitchell toward safety. Nothing was going to stop her from getting him to cover. The stone wall provided minimal protection, but it was better than being completely exposed in open ground. Maria quickly assessed Commander Mitchell's wound and applied a field dressing to slow the bleeding. His face was pale from blood loss, but his eyes remained focused and determined. Enemy voices could be heard calling to each other in the distance, coordinating their approach to the Americans' new position. Maria estimated they had perhaps 3 or 4 minutes before being overrun. She checked her ammunition and realized she was down to her last magazine. Commander Mitchell tried to convince Maria to leave him and escape while she still had a chance. He argued that 1 soldier dying was better than 2, and that she had already done more than enough by attempting the rescue. Maria flatly refused to consider abandoning him. Instead, she began preparing their position for a final stand. She arranged their remaining ammunition for easy access and identified the most likely approaches the enemy would use. If they were going to be captured or killed, she intended to make the insurgents pay dearly for their victory. The sound of gunfire from the hillside above suggested that the rest of their squad was still engaged with enemy forces and unable to provide assistance. Maria and Commander Mitchell were truly on their own. Surrounded by hostile fighters and running out of time and ammunition, Commander Mitchell managed a weak smile and thanked Maria for her courage in attempting the rescue. He told her that regardless of how their situation ended, her actions had demonstrated the finest traditions of military service. Maria gripped his hand and assured him they would both make it home alive. Through a gap in their stone wall protection, Maria spotted movement as enemy fighters began their final approach. She raised her rifle and prepared to sell their lives as dearly as possible, knowing that these next few minutes would determine whether her desperate rescue mission had been worth the enormous risk. The distinctive sound of helicopter rotors suddenly filled the air, growing louder with each passing second. Maria looked up to see 2 military helicopters approaching fast and low over the hills, their door gunners already engaging enemy positions around the checkpoint. Relief flooded through her as she realized that air support had finally arrived. The insurgent fighters immediately shifted their attention from Maria and Commander Mitchell to the new airborne threat. Heavy machine gun fire erupted from the helicopters, forcing enemy combatants to abandon their planned assault and seek cover from the devastating aerial attack that was raining down on their positions. Maria seized the opportunity created by the helicopter assault and attempted to signal their location to the aircrew. She waved her arms and used her emergency mirror to reflect sunlight toward the aircraft, hoping the pilots would spot them among the chaos of the battlefield. One helicopter pilot apparently saw her signals and directed his door gunner to provide covering fire around their position while the second aircraft continued attacking enemy strongholds. The precision of the aerial support was remarkable, with bullets striking close, enough to enemy fighters to suppress them without endangering the trapped Americans' radio. Chatter crackled to life as the helicopter crews coordinated with ground forces for a potential rescue operation. Maria could hear references to American personnel requiring immediate evacuation and wounded soldiers needing medical attention. Hope began to replace desperation in her mind. Commander Mitchell's condition was deteriorating despite Maria's field medical treatment. His face had grown even paler, and she could see that he was struggling to remain conscious. She knew that even with air support, they needed to reach medical facilities quickly if he was going to survive. The helicopter assault had scattered the insurgent forces, but Maria could see that some enemy fighters were still in position and waiting for an opportunity to resume their attack. The situation remained dangerous, and any rescue attempt would be extremely risky for the aircraft crews. One helicopter began circling to identify a suitable landing zone, while the other maintained suppressive fire on known enemy positions. The pilot's voice came through on the emergency frequency, asking for confirmation of their exact location and the nature of Commander Mitchell's injuries. Maria quickly provided the requested information, describing their position behind the stone wall and the severity of Commander Mitchell's leg wound. She also reported that both of them were combat effective and could assist with their own evacuation if necessary. The lead helicopter identified a small clearing about 100 meters from their position that might serve as a landing zone. However, reaching that location would require Maria to carry or drag Commander Mitchell across open ground that was still under potential enemy observation and fire. Maria explained the situation to Commander Mitchell, who, despite his weakened condition, insisted that he could move with assistance. Together, they began planning their movement to the landing zone, timing it to coincide with maximum covering fire from the circling helicopters. Enemy fighters began repositioning themselves as they realized what the Americans were attempting. Maria could see muzzle flashes from new locations as insurgents tried to set up fields of fire that would cover the route to the proposed landing zone. The helicopter crews observed this enemy movement and adjusted their attack patterns to suppress the repositioning fighters. Rockets and machine gun fire erupted from the aircraft as they systematically engaged each new enemy position that appeared. Commander Mitchell struggled to his feet with Maria's assistance, gritting his teeth against the pain from his wounded leg. Blood had soaked through the field dressing, but he was determined to make the attempt to reach the landing zone rather than risk the lives of additional soldiers in a more complex rescue operation. Maria shouldered her rifle and prepared to support Commander Mitchell's weight as they made their dangerous journey to the helicopter. She could see the aircraft beginning its approach to the landing zone, rotors whipping up clouds of dust that would provide some concealment for their movement, but also obscure visibility for everyone involved. Maria and Commander Mitchell began their desperate journey across the open ground toward the landing zone, moving as quickly as his wounded leg would allow. The helicopter's door gunner provided covering fire, but enemy bullets still cracked through the air around them as insurgent fighters tried to prevent their escape. Halfway to the helicopter, Commander Mitchell's injured leg buckled and he began to fall. Maria caught him and took more of his weight, essentially carrying him the remaining distance while maintaining her balance and watching for threats. Her physical strength and determination were being tested to their absolute limits. The helicopter pilot held his aircraft steady, despite taking scattered small arms fire from hidden enemy positions. The crew chief jumped out to assist with loading the wounded commander, while the door gunner continued laying down suppressive fire. Professional military teamwork was evident in every movement. Maria helped lift Commander Mitchell into the helicopter cabin, where a medic immediately began working on his leg wound with proper medical supplies. The severity of his injury was apparent, but the medic's confident movement suggested that he would survive if they could reach a medical facility quickly. As the helicopter prepared to take off, Maria suddenly realized that there might not be room for her aboard the crowded aircraft. She stepped back from the cabin door and waved for them to leave without her, unwilling to delay Commander Mitchell's medical evacuation by even a few seconds. The crew chief grabbed her arm and pulled her aboard, just as the pilot began lifting off, refusing to leave her behind after witnessing her extraordinary courage in rescuing her commander. The helicopter rose quickly from the landing zone, while the second aircraft continued suppressing enemy positions. Enemy fire continued to pursue them as they climbed away from the battlefield, but the pilot's evasive maneuvers and the aircraft's speed soon carried them beyond the range of small arms. Maria looked back at the checkpoint area and could see insurgent fighters emerging from cover, their ambush ultimately unsuccessful despite early tactical advantages. During the flight to the medical facility, Maria sat beside Commander Mitchell as the medic worked to stabilize his condition. He remained conscious and managed to thank her again for risking her life to save his. His gratitude was evident despite his pain and the medications. Affecting his speech, the helicopter touched down at the forward operating base where medical personnel immediately transferred Commander Mitchell to the trauma center. Maria watched as he disappeared into the medical facility, confident that he would receive the expert care needed to make a full recovery. In the weeks that followed, Maria's actions during the ambush became the subject of official investigation and recognition. Multiple witnesses confirmed her extraordinary courage in refusing to abandon her commander and successfully carrying out his rescue under impossible circumstances. Commander Mitchell recovered fully from his wounds and personally recommended Maria for the nation's highest military decoration for heroism. Her actions, he wrote in his report, exemplified the finest traditions of military service and saved not only his life, but potentially the lives of other squad members. The award ceremony took place months later at a major military installation, with Maria's family in attendance to witness her recognition. As she stood at attention while the medal was placed around her neck, she thought about the split-second decision that had changed everything. News reports of Maria's heroism spread throughout the country and internationally, inspiring countless people with the story of her courage and selflessness. Military recruitment offices reported increased interest from women who cited her example as motivation for their own service. Years later, Maria continued serving in the military, eventually rising to senior leadership positions where she could influence training and doctrine. She never spoke publicly about her rescue mission, preferring to let her continued service speak for itself. Commander Mitchell also continued his military career, and he and Maria remained close friends who shared an unbreakable bond forged in combat. Their story became part of military lore, taught in leadership courses as an example of courage, loyalty, and the warrior ethos that binds soldiers together. The checkpoint where the ambush occurred was eventually secured and became a symbol of American determination and the sacrifice of those who serve. A small memorial plaque was installed there, commemorating the courage displayed by ordinary soldiers in extraordinary circumstances.